Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to RawKnux podcast. Please like, follow, and subscribe. I got number 30 in Montreal, fucking goalie's number. They said, here's your jersey. I'm there, 30?
Yeah, I used to get, when I would go to training camp, I'd get like the number, the sent down number, right? Like 62. It's like, fuck, I didn't make the team.
It was a call-up number in Montreal, right? 30. Anytime someone got called up, it was 30. I wanted to change it. And my father bought the jersey at the pro shop. When he first game, he come up, he bought the jersey. You know, I mean, hey, I want to change my number. He said, no, don't change the number. He just didn't want to buy a new fucking shirt, my father, with another number on it, the bastard.
But it's amazing how the person makes the number, because I can't imagine. I don't know any. I think in number 30 in the NHL, growing up watching you, I think that's Chris Nyland.
Yeah.
I don't think of a goalie.
When I stepped on the ice, I never backed down, and I never stayed down.
And I was vicious, and I was malicious, and I don't care.
I'm alive. He's a freaking madman. Look at him going to town.
All right, Monty, good to have you, pal. Awesome stuff. You know Tim, obviously, and it's really good to have you here today. So, listen, you grew up in Montreal. Montreal, were you growing up, were you a Habs fan? And how'd you get into the whole hockey thing as a kid?
Yeah, I mean, growing up in Montreal, I was a Habs fan. I mean, I think the Habs won their 4 cups from 76 through 79. That's when I was 6 to 10 years old. So obviously I remember being, I think, 8 years old and going to a Canadians game against, I think, the California Golden Seals, and I think they won 11-1. That's the only tickets my dad got because I was, blue collar family. And I remember my dad knew a cameraman that got me into the room post game. And I remember just being in awe. There's Kent Dryden, Larry Robinson, Jacques Lemaire, Guy Lafleur, Steve Schott, guys that you played with, Bob Gainey. Yeah. I mean, legends of the game, and just being able to get near them and look at them, and you didn't think they were humans; they were superheroes.
Who was your favorite player? Like, did you have a player you idolized growing up?
Oh yeah, Guy Lafleur. Because I mean, when you're 8 years old, you think you can score all the time, and just like Guy Lafleur, and I mean, he was electrifying to watch. When he got the puck, you got up out of your seat in your living room. That's how electrifying he was.
So you play your minor hockey, Montreal, and listen, most Canadian kids, right? They're geared to playing junior hockey, not going off to college. Some do, some don't, but maybe a little more so today. But back then, Canadian kids going off to college, they wanted to play junior. Why did you go the college route? You ended up at Maine, had an awesome career at Maine, and how did that come about?
Yeah, well, how it came about was, in the 80s, hockey was big and fierce, and I'm unfortunately built like a fire hydrant. I'm 5'7.5", although in the programs I would write 5'10", and they didn't.
Yeah, 5'10".
They didn't measure you.
Yeah.
I remember going to Montreal's camp, and they're like, "Wait a minute, you're 5'7", quarters. You're not 5'10". I go, "I know. I started lying when I was in college." But for me, because I didn't play at the highest levels, when I played a collegiate level a year in Montreal when I think I was 17. And Kent Hughes was actually on my team. And Kent Hughes, being from the West Island, knew more about college hockey. And him and I became fast friends. And I learned a lot that year about college hockey. And I remember at the end of that year, I had some junior teams wanting me to go play in the Quebec League. I don't know if it was a tryout. But I wanted nothing to do with it because I wanted to go play junior hockey, go to college at 19 or 20. And because I figured when my career is over in college, real life begins. And because I went that way, you're 22, 23 years old playing against 19-year-olds sometime at college. You look better than you actually are, and I fooled people into a contract.
Wait. I played college, and a point a game was pretty good. You had like 1,000 points in college, right? So they retired your number too, didn't they? I mean, that had to be an experience. And what was it like playing with Paul Kariya then?
Well, the University of Maine program was a great program when I walked into it.
Sean Walsh, right? Yeah.
He's one of the most influential coaches I had, just because of his personality and how he connected with people. But the program was really good. I mean, we had Scott Pellerin, Keith Carney, Mike Dunham, Garth Snow, Bob Corkum was there. There's a lot of guys from that about little span that I was there that played in the NHL for a long time. And so I got to play with a lot of really good players. And back then goalies didn't butterfly, so you could cross the blue line, and if you picked the low corner, it went in. But playing with Paul Kariya was a treat. I remember when he got to campus, he was a freshman, I was a senior, and the first day he was on the ice, he was doing things, and I was like, okay, this is what it's like when you're on the ice with a superstar. Because up until then, I had never been on the same team with someone that was far and away better than everybody else.
So Tim had mentioned it, that number 19 is retired at Maine. Only 3 players with the numbers retired. Number 19, why not number 10? Why 19?
Well, because when I got recruited, I was told, okay, we got, I think, 19 and 20 and some other number are available, 27. Which one do you want? And Joe Sakic and, Stevie Y were great players at the time. I said, well, that's a center's number. I'll take 19.
Funny. I got number 30 in Montreal, fucking goalie's number. They said, here's your jersey. I'm there, 30?
I used to get when I would go to training camp. Yeah, I'd get like the number. Yeah, the sent down number, right? Like 62. It's like fuck, I didn't make the team.
It was a call up number in Montreal, right? 30. Anytime someone got called up, it was 30. I wanted to change it, and my father bought the jersey at the pro shop when he first game. He come up, he bought the jersey. I mean, hey. I want to change my number. He said, no, don't change the number. He just didn't want to buy a new fucking shirt, my father, with another number on it, the bastard.
But it's amazing how the person makes the number, because I can't imagine. I don't know anyone. I think a number 30 in the NHL, growing up watching you, I think that's Chris Nyland.
Yeah.
I don't think of a goalie.
Yeah, it's funny stuff. But listen, so you had just an awesome career at Maine. You won a national championship. You put up numbers. You don't get drafted with those kind of numbers. That's insanity. I can't believe it. Like, come on. You had what? Freshman year, 60 points. Next year, 81. Oh, I had an off year. Next year, 65. Oh, off year. 65 points in 37 games. And then you just blew it apart in your senior year, 95 points in 45 games. Who does that? Jim Montgomery does. But how come not drafted? What's that?
I think I was 20 my freshman year, so I don't think you're eligible to get drafted. They did have something, a supplemental draft back then. But again, when you're tiny and, NHL was, it proved out that the most NHL scouts were right, because I couldn't stick in the NHL. So they weren't wrong, but I appreciate the comments. And like I said, I played with great players. We had great teams. I mean, that last year we had Korea on our team. Ferraros were twins that came in. We had this incredible freshman class, and I think we averaged 6.5 goals a game as a team.
Yeah, when your profile is 5 inches off of like what your real height is, not many people are going to.
People meet you for real, and they're like, "Wait a minute,
this guy's a liar. We can't draft him." That's awesome.
So I want to touch on your playing career as a pro. And first year you go to St. Louis, 20 points, 67 games. Then you were Peoria a bit, and then you end up getting traded to Habs. Only 5 games there, and then Philly, only 8 games there. The coach Jim Montgomery, right now, looking back on your playing career, why was that? Was it just a size thing? Because you had the talent. Was it a size thing, or was there something you could have done better looking back at it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think if I would have wanted to get more games because my talent level was good. My brain and my competitiveness is what allowed me to be a really good player in college and a real good player in the minors. But at the NHL level, everybody competes, and the best players were far and away better than I was. It's just that simple. So now I'm looking at how do I get into bottom six? And unfortunately, back then, size in the bottom six, it was needed. If you were to win, and I think it's still needed, to be honest, to win the 2-month war in the playoffs. And I don't blame the coaches for, once I got there, like I got used more in the playoffs by coaches than I did in the regular season. I think because there was a little bit of a trust that I would do anything possible to try and help the team, but it still wasn't, and I knew it. It just simple. It wasn't as good as the players that belonged in the NHL.
Right.
So what was is there a player today's game? Like who would you kind of compare your game? Like an Andrew Shaw? I know he doesn't play anymore, but like what was your style?
No, I maybe Garland in Vancouver.
Okay.
It's a good question. Like a lot of people say, like, oh, you're a smaller guy. There's more smaller guys in the game now. Would you play more? I didn't skate like these guys. I don't have the skill like they have. Like, I mean, the skill level in the NHL now, it's incredible what these guys do.
It is.
At the pace they do it at.
So you're credited with given that famous line in Philadelphia, the Legion of Doom line, LeClaire, Lindros, and Renberg. Where did that come from? How'd you pull that out of the hat? The Legion of Doom.
It's funny. My best friend in Montreal is Tommy Cacioppo. We played midget together, and he's a very successful businessman in Montreal. And maybe next year when we're in town in Montreal, we'll go out to dinner with him night before the game.
I'd love to,
because he'll want to know about your fights with Dave Brown and Chief, and all because he's a Flyers fan.
Yeah,
he's going to want to know.
I'll give it to him.
But him and I were on the phone, and I just got and LeClaire joined Renberg and Lindros, and they just started dominating. Like they dominated skill lines, physical lines, defensive lines, offensive lines. They were scoring like 3 goals a game. And I remember a reporter was going around doing an article on them, and he asked me, he goes, why are they so hard to contain? And I said, well, they're big, they're skilled, they're smart, and they're tough. I'm like, you're doomed when you play them. And I just talked to Tommy that morning before I went to practice, and he was a wrestling fan. He's like, you're doomed against it. It's like the Legion of Doom. And I just spit it out to the reporter, and he put it in the paper, and it took off.
Wow, it did. God, did it ever take off. And those guys were dominant, and those are the type of guys you can win with, no question about it.
Yeah.
So, obviously, I want to look at your coaching career and how that got started. And, I can remember every coach I ever had. Every coach I ever had since I started playing hockey. And I guess I got something from all of them. I know I got something from each and every one of them, and some I like better than others. You mentioned Sean Walsh. When in your hockey career, when you were playing, did you say, geez, maybe one day I want to be a coach?
I honestly thought I wanted to be a coach when I was in high school.
Wow.
I remember going to hockey schools when I was like 12 years old, and I remember Scotty Bowman came to one of the hockey schools, and we could do a question answer with him. I asked every question. No other kid wanted to ask. I was asking him about how he handles the big three. I was at, Lapointe, Savard, Robinson. I asked him why he had Savard at the net front in the 78 playoffs. Like, my brain went to how the pieces work. And I thought I remember Bowman putting Gainey and not shut with Lemaire and Lafleur against the Central Red Army in 76, the New Year's Eve game, And so my brain always went there. And then when I got to college, we had Grant Stanbrook and Sean Walsh. Grant Stanbrook's the best one-on-one coach I've ever been around for any position. Being able to teach someone how to be individually better to help the team. And Sean Walsh was so good at getting a whole group to be like-minded, and he helped us play fast. And when I got there, I was like, wow, this is a next level coaching that really helped me, and I would like to be able to do this at some point. And I remember Sean said to me when I played for him, he goes, when you're done playing, just give me a year heads up. I'm going to create a spot for you on my staff. And that stuck with me. Unfortunately, Sean passed while I was still playing, not for myself, but for the program at the University of Maine and the great impact he had on so many people's lives.
And were you looking to coach like at the college? I know you're a player assistant that year in UHL, but you went right to college pretty much. Was that the goal?
I did. I called around East Coast League opportunities, American League, college. And when you're calling around and your career is over, people don't answer the phone.
Right? Yeah, you're forgettable, right?
Who the fuck are you?
Yeah, exactly. And you don't have any experience. They don't know your skill set. So I got lucky. Jeff Jackson gave me an opportunity to volunteer. I went there for a year. Luckily, I'd put enough money away that I could afford to go basically a year without earning income. It's easy too. You don't have a family. I was single. And that was an incredible experience. I'm glad I did it because I worked for an elite coach who really understood how to prepare, how to practice, how to treat people, how to build toward a season-long journey. And I learned a tremendous amount from Jeff, still indebted to him for that. Grateful for the opportunity he gave me. And then I got an opportunity to move on to a paying job the following year as an assistant. So college just ended up being the avenue that provided the opportunity.
Well, it's I look at Lemaire, one of the best coaches ever. He's the best coach I ever had. I absolutely love him. When he retired, he went and played in Switzerland. Switzerland. And then he player coached there. Then he came back and he assistant coach in Plattsburgh in the college level. And then junior a bit. And then he came to the NHL. And when I asked him why he did those routes, he said, I want to know the difference between all these players, European players, college players, junior players. And I wanted to get a feel for, how they react in situations, and how to coach certain guys. It was brilliant, actually. But I look at...
That's why I went to Russia.
Yeah, right?
I went to Russia to learn how
to coach?
Pardon me?
You went to Russia to learn how to coach?
Well, to learn the skills of how they teach.
I went to Russia for different reasons.
But... Russian gas you went for. You went for the Russian gas, huh?
They make good oil.
Yeah.
So your coaching career starts out, and come on, you won a championship in Maine as a player. So then we get into coaching. You won in the USHL, right? Clark Cup twice, right?
Yep.
Then you win a championship at Denver. Yeah, you've won at those levels, and that says a lot. And now you've shown you can do something that a lot of people can't do, quite frankly. And you get hired by Dallas. And I guess that first job I want to know about, what the difference going from the USHL to college to pro, the difference in the players and how you coach those guys. Because, listen, guys, they don't make a lot of money. They're hungry in the USHL, I'm sure. Then you got college players. Some guys know they're never going pro. But then you get the NHL and you're dealing with all of them. How are the transition from each position to the NHL?
Yeah. As far as what my beliefs and core values of how I treat people were kind of the same, but you're just dealing with more mature people. So in junior level, you're like a father figure, right? Yeah. And they're all ears. They all want to get to Division I, or they all want to get to drafted. So they're sponges. At the college level, now you're dealing with a student athlete. So the amount of time you have them isn't as much. So you learn to be a little more efficient, but you're practicing a lot more than games. And then when you get to the pro level, now it's not so much. Now you're kind of like a big brother, and you're in a partnership. And how you create that partnership, how you gain professional athletes' trust is through your preparation, it's through your communication, and it's through your team having some success. Because as you know, when you walk into an NHL dressing room, guys are like, okay, what's this guy all about? And they want to, you got to show them what you're talking about. And it's the way it should be, quite frankly. And for me, the biggest difference to going to pro was I didn't have as much practice time. And it was learning how to be efficient with the practice time and the video meetings and getting players to understand how to play fast within. And that was my biggest learning curve. And besides that, it was understanding, that everybody, and you do this in college too. Like I had Troy Terry and I had first round picks in college. I didn't treat them the same as the guys that were in and out of the lineup. But at the professional level, there's sometimes guys are wondering, why are you not playing me down the stretch? If they're not having a good game, they expect to be on the ice in big moments, regardless of how they're playing. So the communication that next day, was a learning curve for me of, okay, I got to bring this guy into my office. In college, the guys they understand it's what's best for the team. Pro guys understand that as well, but they also know there's a pecking order, and you got to respect that pecking order. And learning how to communicate, I understood the pecking order. How to communicate through the pecking order was a learning curve.
I was going to say, you talked about as a player with Paul Kariya and like, you're the first time you're on the ice with this superstar. What was your take and feeling like? Did you coached Johnny Gaudreau in Dubuque, right? Like, was he, as a coach and being in that position, did you look at him like at that moment, like, was he going to be the star he is today?
Well, I knew his brain and his skill set with the puck, his ability to find time and space was high end. Was he going to be able to do it against the bigger, faster people that know how to check better? Because as you go up, and I'm really proud of him, of what he's accomplished, because it's not easy to do. He's another guy might list himself at 5'10", what's 5'8".
We're all liars. We're all liars.
And but just his brain was at Paul Kariya's level, like his ability. I remember coaching him, and we had a 2-on-1 drill we'd do all the time, and I would let it go one rep just to see what he would do next. That's how creative he was. I can't say I saw him being a 100-point player in the NHL because that's hard to predict when someone is 5'8". He was 138 when he played for me.
It's crazy.
So you talk about that pecking order, and that used to burn me as a player, that pecking order. And it wasn't I guess it was a little more pronounced back in the day because you were a fourth liner or third liner. You have shit on you. The bus breaks down. You guys get out and push the fucking thing, not the big wheels. Now, how did that change for you that when, viewing that pecking order as a coach as opposed to a player? Mm-hmm. And maybe not in college, obviously you must have been top of the pecking order, but the pro game, a little more humbling. How was that?
Yeah,
and
it's an adjustment. You can't, I found in your conversations, you got to create more of an understanding of the person. And quite frankly, it's an area I think I've grown in a lot of ways. I did the same thing. I had to go through it in quite frankly, at the University of Denver. The way I communicated to players at the junior level to college, they changed. to be able to connect with players. I think communication is a strength of mine. Listening and being able to get on the same page through our communication skills. But I found at the pro level, you should spend a lot more time listening so that you understand exactly where someone's coming from. Because they're dealing with a lot more. Well, they got wives, kids, they got kids that are sick at home, someone's moving in the middle of the season. How is their adjustment? You don't have any of that really in junior and college, right? Everybody's in college, your team is what it is the first day is throughout the whole year. You don't have call-ups, you don't have trades. So all of that was, understanding that. The pecking order you talk about, like the fortunate thing of having been in dressing rooms, I understood the pecking order. Like if Patrice Bergeron, isn't playing well, luckily that never happens. But if he's not, and I'm changing the lines, whoever the wingers are with Patrice are getting listed first, right?
Yeah.
I'm not putting Patrice down as the third line center.
Yeah.
That's just common respect and understanding that happens. And I got to say, with a guy like Patrice Bergeron, that would never bother him, but that's the way you should treat him.
Yeah.
Right?
It's also job preservation too, right?
Well, yeah, I was going to say, like, did you ever
bit.
think about, like, the college gigs are pretty, like I had Scott Sandlin at Duluth. He's still there. Did you ever just think about staying in Denver for?
Oh, I did. Absolutely. I mean, Denver was a great job. It's a fantastic program. You have the ability to win. It's a great place to live. I mean,
college coaches too, right? It's almost coach for life, right? Like
that's what I mean. Like,
true.
Right?
It's not so much true anymore because it's become a higher paying job. Quite frankly, they're making good money. They're not working in the summer, working hockey schools. But with that, it is if you have success and you're treating people the right way, you're usually going to have a job that is going to last the rest of your career. And it wasn't easy to pick up and leave. It just wasn't.
So how does that happen? Listen, you won. Did Dallas come and get you, or were you putting feelers out, or did they come and say, we want this guy?
Yeah, they come after you.
Yeah.
I mean, I still think it's the same thing, quite frankly, when I got the job in Boston, like Boston, they called me. It's not
Were there a lot of teams after you in the NHL? When
this was the third year, the year I left to Dallas was kind of like the third year that I had more than one interview.
Okay.
And they were getting more serious as far as me being a serious candidate. I think after my third year at Denver, I interviewed with a couple of teams, and I could tell that, I wasn't the guy, but there was someone that I was becoming someone that might be a coach in the future. So those interviews are beneficial because it's a process to know, who you're interviewing with and what they're looking for and the questions that you get asked. But by the time, the Dallas opportunity came, I think it was the time in my career where I spoke to my wife and I said, it's either we do this or we stay in college. And that's why it was hard to make that decision. Because I think you can only say no so many times before they stop knocking on the door.
Yeah.
Did you have any similar feeling or like excitement, like as a player playing? You get to the NHL as a player. Now you're there as a coach. Was there? I know you're older, more mature, probably as the coach, obviously. But was there any like that first "I'm here" kind of excitement feeling, or was it just?
Absolutely, there is. Yeah, I mean, I remember texting, my mother, calling her the day of driving into my first NHL game, right? I'm like, you're watching tonight, right? Like, yeah. I'm like, well, now you helped me get here. I think you're more mature about it, but damn, it's exciting. It's the NHL. It's the greatest league in the world.
That's awesome.
Right.
Nothing can change that.
If you love your pet like I love my St. Bernard Adele, you'll want to feed them a balanced, biologically appropriate raw diet. The reason I've chosen Formula Raw is because all blends of their food are locally sourced and they consist of exclusively human-grade meat and organs, as well as fruits and vegetables. And all products used are hormone and antibiotic-free. So like I said, if you love your pet like I love Adele, you'll choose Formula Raw. Make sure you go to formularaw.com and use the promo code RawKnux at checkout to receive 10% off your first order. That's RawKnux, RAWKNUX. So Jim Nill knocks on the door, interviewed. Get those interviews, and you take the job. They offer you a deal. You get in Dallas, and right away you start to make things happen with that organization. Now, how for you again? You said a little bit, but the biggest adjustment for you leaving college in the pro game, as far as coaching players and dealing with them. What's the biggest difference between college and pro for a coach?
Yeah, I think it's first connecting with your leadership core. And quite frankly, I was lucky. There's great leaders there and really good people. Yeah, Jamie Benn is an outstanding captain and a really good human being and player. And you have Tyler Seguin was there, and Klingberg was an assistant. Jason Spezza was an assistant. And those are guys that have accomplished a lot already in the league. Connecting with them, that's, in the NHL, those guys know how to lead the team, and they're already the presence in the locker room. You're not going in like you would in college or grabbing your captains and telling them like, hey, you guys need to pull it in the right direction here in practice today. Those guys already know that. Like, you got to be pros, But for me, it was the biggest adjustment was, okay, in college, I got 3 days of practice. We're going to do this day, this, that. And when we play on Friday and Saturday night, we're going to play fast because we've done all the work already. The preparation's done. Well, if you're going to play Thursday in Chicago, Saturday in Minnesota, and Sunday in Buffalo, you don't have that time. So how do I get the players to understand the game plan's going to wrinkle a bit and make it real simple so the players can just go out and execute? Now, thankfully, guys in the NHL are the best players in the world for a reason. They don't need to see much to be able to go and execute that. But there is a learning curve about time management and being able to make things simple so players can go out and make it look really creative and play fast.
Was there what about the pressure of just being the coach? Like in Denver, you probably, I would assume at some point felt like, I ain't going anywhere. You get to the NHL level. Was there added pressure right away? Like I got to keep my job, type, what I'm talking about?
Well, it's funny. I guess maybe I was a little naive there.
Mm-hmm.
I never thought about losing. I always thought first third of the season is you get to understand how we're going to play. Second third of the season, you make incredible growth. And then the third, that's when you're playing your best, the last third of the season. And I've always viewed that but the pressure is where I noticed it. I think maybe we were 5-5 in our first 10. We were something like that. I remember won our first 2, and then all of a sudden we're 2-3, and
start questioning yourself.
Yeah,
you start questioning yourself.
Like I should stay in Denver.
No, the funny thing is everyone starts talking about, okay, first 10 games, you need to get 12 to 14 points to be on a playoff. And I'm like, well, I'm not so worried about results right now. I'm worried about the process, and I'm still a very process-oriented coach. But everybody starts to worry about it. So the pressure does mount. And being able to stay with my process of what I believe a team, how it builds throughout the year and gets better. I didn't know I had to alter it, but I had to alter it. And I did, and it took a while. And I thought for a little chunk there before Christmas, I did not have the same swagger I had previously because we're losing a lot more than I had ever lost before. And I don't see in the second third post-Thanksgiving, I didn't see us growing the way I wanted us to. And it was very beneficial that we had the All-Star break for me to have time to get my brain away from the day-to-day, because the NHL season's a grind. A lot of times you can't self-reflect. and where do we need to go? How do we get better? That was very beneficial for me and the staff I had. I was very lucky with the great coaches I had. Rick Bowness was really influential just because of his experience in the league, was very beneficial for me. Great man.
So that first year, 93 points, fourth in the Central. You lost in the second round, St. Louis. That's a start. You come into the next year, 31 games, 17, 11, and 3. Looking good. You got it in gear. And then I'll just say it. The shit hits the fan.
Yeah.
And I'm going to, and I love your honesty. And I'm just going to go to your quote. The day I was let go by the Stars, incredible shame and guilt to have my family name, to tell your wife who has warned you that you lost your job because of this. My 2 oldest boys are 10 and 8, and I have to tell them you lost your job, not because the team was losing, but because of your own actions and behaviors and your addiction to alcohol. That's really, really hard. Now, man, now it's time to self-reflect, time to get honest. And you do. How difficult emotionally and mentally was that time on you? And do you feel like my career is over?
Oh, there's no question that I felt my career is over. How do you rebound from this? The shame and guilt you're feeling, and you're doing a lot of self-reflection. And then you realize, I got to change. I need to make a change in my life if I want to be the father and the husband, first of all, and my own happiness, So I had to start working on myself. I went and got help. I learned about the science of addiction. I learned from a program of how important honesty every day in my life was. And it's your own happiness allows you to grow as a person. It allows you to change. You got to put the work in, but you can't do it alone. You need to have people who understand what you're going through. You need to have a great family. Like, I'm incredibly lucky to have the wife that I have. You talk about better for better and worse. Yeah. She saw my worst, and she stuck with me. And I don't know if she's seen my better yet, my best. I hope not. I hope I just keep getting better. And my boys, they're old enough to understand. And I hope, to me, it was the worst day, but it was also the best day. Because not only am I a better person, right? And then everyone's like, well, why couldn't you just stop? Well, I didn't realize I had a problem. Mm-hmm. Just put the bottle down. Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Plus, it's easy. Not easy.
That's easy.
It's not easy though. Also, if on paper here, you're kind of like nothing but net your whole career here, right? Like, it's not like you had, from a coaching to playing standpoint, like everything, like why change, right? Like, was there any incidences like before that Dallas thing that kind of were signs for you?
Oh yeah, for sure. Once you look back, you realize that, wow, I was probably lucky 5 other times, right? That I didn't, and maybe I was unlucky because maybe I would have, looked myself in the mirror and look at how I was handling myself, and you know what? Like, for me, it was, we win a big game. It wasn't when we lost that I would go and unfortunately overindulge, it was on good times because we learned growing up, and I'm sure you guys did too.
Work hard, play hard.
You win a big game on Saturday night. It's time to go, right?
Oh yeah.
Time to go with the
green
boys.
Light. Green light.
We don't play till Tuesday. Doesn't get any greener. Yeah. And thankfully, because of a program I work and friends I have and the work that I've put in and the support group I have, most importantly, it's so important, that people understand you can't do it alone. And I have fantastic friends and family that I'm incredibly indebted to and still am. And I'm very lucky that my rock bottom didn't cost me a lot. You know, sure, it cost me a job, but you can come back in your profession, even if your profession changes, as long as you're willing to make change.
So the coach is now getting coached in the new way to live life. And certainly I've been there, you know, and I look at, when I look at my bottom and then trying to convince people, when you get back out there, it's just not so easy. And I get it. People are not going to have their hand out, say, oh, Chris, we'll take a chance on you. I coached a couple of years down the East Coast League. I loved it. I had 1 year as an assistant in the NHL. I wasn't an assistant coach. There's no question. But I loved being a head coach when I was. And then, you know, the shit hit the fan for me. And I know coming out of that, there weren't a lot of people, like I said, with their hand out saying, hey, Chris, we'll give you a hand. I was fortunate. I had a friend here in Montreal that helped get me an opportunity in the radio, and because there wasn't anything out there. And I get that. I do. I honestly do. And I don't have a problem with it. I look at your situation, very, very successful coach. And then you know how you can get fucking blackballed in the NHL, because you can get blackballed. You get an opportunity to go to St. Louis as an assistant. Somewhat humbling, but I'm sure you were grateful for that opportunity. How did that come about? And who said, listen, I want to give Jim a second chance? Who was that?
Yeah, it is incredibly humbling. And, you know, to be honest, I didn't know if the opportunity in the NHL would ever happen again. Right. You don't know. Although many people in the program I worked told me it would. You know,
yeah.
I just didn't believe them. It was like they're just being good friends, yeah. Right? But Doug Armstrong, to answer the question simply, Doug Armstrong gave me the second chance. We had moved as a family from Dallas to St. Louis, and it just happened. And we were there for like 3 months, and there was an opportunity, an opening on the St. Louis staff. And Doug Armstrong called me, I think, from my time I'd spent in St. Louis. There was a lot of people internally in the organization too, who were not only maybe fans of my coaching ability, but also knew me as a person, and you know, knew that I was virtuous in my changing. And then I had to prove that to Doug, and we had a couple of interviews, and I'm also incredibly grateful, you know, to Chief, because Chief, I was coming on Craig Berube's staff, and, you know, my interview with him was very good, and he was very honest about how he thought I could help, and also just about being a great guy. Like, I mean, I'm lucky I went to the Blues, because I don't think I was a great coach when I first got back in, you know, because you're going through, it's the new you know, yeah. You're not going to be having beers with the staff. You're not going to be, and all those situations you got to go through.
But what a place to be able to, you know, practice that and apply that as an assistant, not being the head guy, you know, being able to keep an eye on your sobriety and do the things you have to do to one day hopefully get back there. So what an awesome situation.
Not only that, too. Yeah, not you know, that is all true, and you're bang on. But even like, thank God there was 9 months, you know, before I started, before I got the opportunity. Because if it would have happened 4 months in, I don't think I would have had the success, you know, that I did in St. Louis. I mean, COVID was great for me personally, as far as the time with my family and the time to grow and learn.
Get your legs under you and sobriety.
And then the opportunity to work professionally with great people with the Blues, and the amount of care that though they have, the culture there was excellent, not only for me, but for anyone that was there. And, you know, the ability to work with good people, to watch. I grew professionally there. Never mind personally, professionally now. I learned from great people. I learned from Steve Ott. I learned from Craig Berube. I learned from Mike Van Ryn, David Alexander, and Doug Armstrong, how he dealt with people. So you're learning from people that have won the Stanley Cup and that have had a lot of success in the league for a long time. Al McInnes is in the organization. There's a lot of good people in the Blues org. So I was a sponge, and I'm not making those decisions. I'm giving input, and I'm learning and watching from other people making decisions. And it really helped me for Boston.
Your input, and I say this because I believe the previous year before you got there, the Blues were like 27 on the power play. In the year you were there, didn't they go up to like second, third in the league or something like that in the power play?
Yeah, I mean, we actually, Chief did so the first year I was there, right. I was, Otter and I switched power play, penalty kill in the middle of the season. Otter's the one that got the power play to second or third in the league.
Well, God bless you.
I took over the penalty kill, and I think the penalty kill went to fifth or sixth or something.
Well, there you go. You guys working together. Obviously, it's a team effort, but it says a lot. Certainly that the special teams, whether Otter and you and Craig together, I mean, it says a lot what you did there. And you certainly made the most of that situation. No question about it. So,
it was a fun group to work with. And like I said, I learned a ton from everybody on that elite staff. And, I was able to take a lot of that to Boston.
So you're going to take that to Boston. So you're there for 2 years, the off season. How does the Boston thing come about? Now, I know interviews, were they coming after you, or did people say, okay, he's been there 2 years, I guess he's stayed sober, he's been good, now it's time to let bad Jimmy, good Jimmy, back into the game? How did that come about?
Yeah, my experience in even the Denver job is that people know who they're targeting and they call you. And I think I was one of probably several people on the list the Bruins wanted to talk to. And I think through the interview process, the opportunity ended up coming my way. And again, I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity and trust that Don Sweeney, Cam Neely, and the Jacobs family, led by the chairman and especially Charlie Jacobs, who leads the Bruins, for giving me the opportunity after a couple of interviews with them.
I was going to say, it's awesome for me. I'm grateful that I get to, listen to your story and I can relate to it a little bit. But, how you go to Boston, what I like about your story is you use that word change. And I think we all think, things are going to change, right? Like, especially when you remove a substance or an issue that you're dealing with. And here you go back to Boston, you're just like back to the winning ways, like a lot of opportunities for that green light, right? How do you handle those today? Are those hard for you? Or, does them, is it something that, because what you're going through, I can relate to, and it doesn't, it's hard is what I'm saying.
Yeah, right? It is. But you develop tools to deal with it. The phone is an incredible ally of mine. And what I've learned is even in those high moments, like, for instance, we set the record. I think it was
the whole year was a high moment.
The whole year was a green light.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I think you just know that that's no longer, and like, again, the tools you use to be able to, and the grind of the NHL season, there's always what's next. And that what's next is really what drives me. And then also being present for my kids, and my wife, not looking to go and, have drinks till 1 or 2 in the morning. And then the next day you're sluggish. Like, it's just I'm sharper, I'm more concise, I have more energy at the rink, I have the ability to go and make 15 touches instead of 3 touches because you're wondering when your next nap is. Like, I mean, those things that you're just better.
Yeah, and certainly getting to Boston, getting that opportunity, that's so awesome. But then what you do with it, and says a lot about you as a coach. And I know you might say, "Oh, it's about the players," and it is about the players.
It is about
you being, in charge of that orchestra and getting it done. And when you say it's about the players, and I'll say one thing I noticed about the Bruins. And listen, the incredible season you had. I remember as a player going through, bad times, losing games, and how much it sucks coming to the rink. But when you're winning, and your whole season was like this, walking into the rink, it's like it's the best. No better feeling. But looking at your team and your players and that core you talked about and that pecking order, I noticed a few times this season, not just once. And this got to be a dream guy to coach, and Patrice Bergeron. You would call timeouts, okay? And the one game in particular I saw it, guys on the ice come over, and you're talking, or you're about to talk, and there's guys down the end of the bench just sitting there not even paying attention. He fucking went down there and said something, and next thing, the whole bench came down and crunched into that circle. And I'm saying, man, just because there's 5 players on the ice, everybody has to hear this. And having a leader like that, I saw him do it again. And I'm like, it must be a dream to coach and that whole thing. But that whole season, what was the most difficult thing you had to deal with? Not the sobriety piece, just as a hockey coach during that season.
It's
you got to think, right? You got to think.
Yeah, I do, because you know what, we didn't face a lot of adversity in the season. We just didn't, and right away when you get here, like just lucky. Like Patrice Bergeron, incredible. Like has your back right away, is gonna reinforce it in a dressing room. And then you have Brad Marchand, you have Pasternak, you have Charlie McAvoy, then you have other guys like, Mike Foligno. I'm not Mike Foligno.
Mike.
Nick.
That was our era.
Yeah. Mike, you fought probably.
Yeah.
Or he was probably too smart to fight you. But, you have Nick Foligno, you have Lindholm, you have Carlo. I mean, I can go on and on with quality people that to watch our team practice sometimes. I would say to Joe Sacco, like, God, look at these guys practice. Like, they didn't get satisfied. It was on to what's next. So I think just keeping players involved, and I mean involved, keeping the team with some challenges that would allow us to continue to grow and when to use them was probably the biggest challenge we had as a staff. We lost, I think, 2 or 3 games. One was a tie, and we had 2 days off right before the break. We go play Toronto. And I knew the day before we played Toronto, we practiced our best practice of the year. And I'm like, these guys embraced the challenge and went into Toronto and won. And there was another time where we had I think 3 losses in a row, and they were to teams that were out of the playoffs. And, we had a meeting on the plane with the captains, and it might have been 5 of them. And, we go into Winnipeg and we play a real sound game, win a good hard game on the road against a good team. So it was a season where it just seemed like we were going to find a way. And that was what made losing in the playoffs so hard.
Yeah, for sure. I can imagine. And you talked about it. Adversity, right? So you don't face much. And quite frankly, in the playoffs, you're up 3-1 on a team. So it's going along pretty good, but all of a sudden the wheels end up falling off. What if? What if Marchand scores in Game 5 in overtime? What if? You'd still be coaching maybe in the playoffs. Who knows? But that didn't happen. One of the things that worried me, now, obviously, as a coach, you have to go back and say, all right, where did we fuck up, right? You want to make corrections. You want to be better. Do you, when you look back at that, and Tim and I, we talked about at the beginning of the year, we were talking about Boston, and I had mentioned this to you before, but two of your best players, sentiment, Krejci and Bergeron, are 38 and 30, whatever, 37. Like, they're older. I worried about those guys down the stretch and near the end of the season. When you look back, could you have or would you have done something different with what you know now with those two players? Because Bergeron gets hurt in the last game in Montreal, and Krejci, I don't know when he got hurt, but like, it's easy to sit here and say it now, but looking back, could you have done anything different with those guys?
Yeah, we don't think so. Internally, we had looked, I think Bergeron sat 6 of the last 18 games, something like that. I know he sat out 6 games.
Yeah.
And it was really calculated scientifically of how we were going to get ourselves best prepared for game 1 of the playoffs. We set the records. That was great, but we sat out 4 players one game in Carolina, and we won it in a shootout. Yeah. And I think it was Marchand, Lindholm, Bergeron, and the other guy maybe was Orlov. I don't remember. But, you're sitting out 4 guys. You're not going for the record. You're going to set yourself up for game 1 of the playoffs. And we wanted Krejci to play the last game of the year, but he was having, issues throughout the year. And the amount of practice time that those guys sat out was for what you say. I mean, the body, unfortunately, at 37 is not what it was at 27. It's everybody in life understands that.
Yeah.
So we don't second guess ourselves with what we did as far as that. It's kind of like, I also don't second guess myself putting Bergeron in game 5. People are like, well, why don't you save him for second round? Could you imagine what people would be saying if they knew I didn't play Bergeron, he was healthy game 5, and we lost? I mean, he scored,
Yeah.
You just, unfortunately, it lingers with us what happened. We own it.
Of course.
Right? We know we lost to a good team in Florida. They're in the finals. But we still were up 3-1. You find a way to close that out. And that's the competitor in us. It's hard to let go, but we got to move forward. Like, what do we learn from this, especially with our young core players that are going to be here a long time? How do we all grow from this and make sure that whatever happens in the regular season, that the next time we get to the playoffs, that we own the moment like we did for an incredible regular season? For whatever reason, and I've watched the games back, we didn't play as fast as we did in the regular season. And those are things that are going to eat at me until we start playing again next year. We just simply didn't do what we did. And there's no hiding from that. We're not going to hide from that. We're going to own that. Just like you want to create change in your personal life. I've been through that. We need to create change in our professional life as a group. And I'm confident with the people that are here, we are going to do that.
Yeah, and you got to give Florida a little credit too. I mean, look, they're in the finals, right? Like,
they're a good hockey team.
Yeah, right.
They're a well-coached team,
So,
how about you? And again, not to second guess, but to get better. Look, and how difficult was this call? Now, I don't know who's injured. I don't have the injury report, none of that stuff. But how difficult is it to go into Game 7 and switch goaltenders? Because honestly, I'm a guy. I go with the guy. I'm going with him to the end. I'm going to die with him. I'm going to live with him. And do you feel that Swayman may have had a whole lot of pressure on him putting him in that Game 7?
Well, again, knowing if you know Swayman,
Yeah.
he
And I
has
don't.
incredible swagger about him and a confidence.
Yeah.
Whether it's game 1, game 7, he's going to get the job done. And guys love playing for him. Guys love playing for Olmark as well. I think that with the way the season went, and again, everything's in hindsight,
Yeah, of course.
but that's what we have to do. We have to look at it. How do we grow from this? And I've said this before, but the mental energy you use, and you know this in the playoffs, right? Get it done the next round. Who was that? Claude Ruel that you told me that story about? Right?
Toe Blake.
Toe Blake. Yeah.
He ain't got nothing yet.
Yeah, what's the
haven't
story?
done
What's the
nothing yet.
story?
And it is.
Well, I was telling Monty, I remember the days in Montreal, Toe Blake would come in. We'd won the first round. He'd come in. Yeah, you ain't got nothing yet. We'd win the next round. You ain't got nothing yet.
Yeah.
And he'd do that. And then we finally did it. 86, it was, you ain't got nothing yet.
Yeah, got to do it again.
Now go do it again. That's what it was. Like that's old school, right? But
it
that's
is.
the
It's
mentality they have, right? You got nothing. And so yeah.
Yeah, well, for us, with that mentality, with the grind it is, for a goalie to be able to go, throughout that when we hadn't relied on him to run that, run the gamut during the regular season.
Yeah.
That's where, when I look at myself, and I also look at, I've looked at deep pairings. Maybe I should have switched certain matchups, but in hindsight, there's not that much that, I could say, man, I would have done this differently. But this is the learning process. You look at those things and looking at body language, looking at guys' eyes, wanting the moment versus not wanting the moment. I've done some reading on some body language stuff that might help me as a coach, moving forward. But in the end, we know we didn't get the job done. And that stays with us. It's going to stay with me forever.
Oh,
because I think we had the team to win it all. And for me, I've always felt I've been able, I talk about that last third of the year, get my team to play its best at the most important time. And I failed there.
That process, right?
Yeah.
That you're talking about. And
some people think it's a weakness, as you know, for me to admit that I failed there. There's nothing wrong with being vulnerable.
No.
It's how you grow. Because if you don't admit it, you're just taking a blind eye. You're going to repeat it.
Yeah. And to be vulnerable and to do it on the stage that you're on, because, when we talk about, there's also the media out there looking at all this and saying, then they're going to, you're going to have people question you about certain things. But I think that's just awesome. And it speaks to the change in you and the change for the better. There's no question about it.
I got to ask though, real quick.
Go ahead,
Off top.
Timothy.
Did you grow up hating Boston?
Being
in Montreal. Yeah. I'm sitting here and I'm like,
what? Did I hate Montreal?
I'm just thinking like this whole thing's going on. I'm like, this guy probably grew up like hating Boston,
Yeah, more the Nordiques that I hated.
Yeah.
I got to be honest. I hated the Nordiques. The Bruins I had a lot of respect for just because, how
bad
tough
Bruins.
they
Just
were?
because you have to say
The
that
big
right
bad
now.
Bruins.
Because you have to say that.
Big bad Bruins.
And speaking of that reputation, listen, those fans, it's like in Philadelphia. They're going to demand that you have, I don't care, I hear you love to play fast, I get it. But you better have a goddamn tough team in that town. It's like Philly. Your team has to be a tough team. They have
You better
to be
blue collar in Boston.
They have to be resilient and all that. When you talk about playing fast, how do you, and I know you're up against the clock here, but how do you, that playing fast how do you slip in that playing fast and being a good defensive team also? How do you blend that together and get that message through to the players? Because, boy, there's some guys who want to play fast and forget about the other part of the game, and you know that as well as I do. How do you get that message across?
Yeah, well, to us, not playing fast is also checking fast. It's not just with the puck. But to your point, I mean, there's some guys that are gifted, like, you guys talked about Johnny Gaudreau earlier and David Pasternak. These guys smell a turnover and they're gone. You can't tell those guys not to go, because invariably those guys know when you're getting possession. Does it burn you at times? Yes, it does. But you have to live with that at times. And then understanding when we don't have the puck, everybody's got to look the same is really important to our D-zone coverage. And that's where I think everybody's held to the same standard without the puck. But with the puck, you got to let the painters paint and you got to let the grinders dig.
Yeah. Oh, I know that digging part. I know that. They never fucking gave me a paintbrush. How about, well, Tim, you must have had a paintbrush, huh?
Yeah, right. What's a paintbrush?
Huh?
No, what do you, sorry. I just got
Monty
confused.
was saying you got to let the painters paint
Oh, yeah. No, I was, yeah.
and the diggers dig.
I definitely
shovel.
didn't dig. Clearly, I don't listen.
But you know what? You played for a great coach.
You
in
hear me?
Jock
I was just like, yeah. You guys were just like, what is he talking
Yeah.
about?
What do you got? Ear muffs on?
No,
or
it's
earphones?
someone's hammering. I'm like, I'm so close to being like, shut the fuck, because someone's like doing some hammering that like, it sounds like it's right next to me. And I'm just sorry. Anyways, yeah. All of it sounded like too much work is all I'm saying. So.
Anyway, Monty, listen, they had an awesome season.
Thank you.
And it sucks losing the playoffs. You get back at it. I know you will. And your team, certainly, I wish you well. And I want to certainly kudos to you for changing your life. And I really mean that. From going from a position you had in Dallas there to almost thinking your career is over. And now making those changes in your life to benefit, your personal life, but your family, your kids, everybody around you love and care about, and certainly your career. I couldn't be happier for a guy that is a good man, and I really, really appreciate your time. I do. I wish you well.
You, Stapes, Knux, I appreciate you having me on. I really do. And again, I'm incredibly grateful for the people in Dallas that helped me face my problems, the people who gave me a second chance in St. Louis and Boston. And I'm very lucky to be part of the Bruins family, because it's a great place to live and it's a great place to work.
Listen, Monty, enjoy Cape Cod. Get down there. You'll love it with your kids. But the seashore side, like Chatham down there, watch out. Sharks in the water, big time. Serious.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I've heard about it.
Right? Yeah, it's big time down there. So,
yeah.
Anyway.
You can come and you go in the water, test the water.
I'll be the bait.
I know you'll punch him right in the nose.
No. Fourth line is go in and test the water. The guy, right? There we go. I won't have a paintbrush. Don't
That's
worry.
like going into the old Spectrum, right? Fourth line starts. Let's see what the Flyers are throwing out.
The only 2 games you start all year: the Flyers, and the Bruins.
Yeah.
Yahoo! All right.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the Raw Knuckles podcast. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe.